It was a cold, gray evening when I found myself driving along the old country road, the kind where the trees grow thick and the pavement narrows to a single lane. I had been on my way home from visiting a friend, and the drive felt endless. The sun had set hours ago, leaving me with nothing but the dim glow of my headlights and the occasional flash of a streetlight in the distance. The radio was static, the hum of the engine the only sound, and I couldn't shake the growing sense of isolation as the night wore on. That's when I saw him, a figure standing by the side of the road, thumbing a ride. A hitchhiker, dressed in a weathered jacket and jeans, holding up his thumb as if he had been waiting for hours. He didn't look out of place, but something about him felt off. Maybe it was the way his clothes were too clean for someone traveling down this rural highway, or maybe it was the way he didn't seem to react to my headlights, not even flinching when I slowed down. I debated for a moment, the thought of stopping crossing my mind. I'd heard the stories about hitchhikers who weren't what they seemed. They weren't always innocent travelers. Sometimes they were predators in disguise, but I wasn't heartless. I couldn't just drive by and ignore him. So I pulled over, my tires crunching against the gravel as I came to a stop. The hitchhiker didn't smile when I rolled down the window. Instead, he peered in at me, his eyes dark and unreadable. "You headed north?" he asked, his voice gravelly, as if he hadn't spoken in days. "Yeah, I'm going that way." "Where are you headed?" I asked, trying to keep the conversation polite but wary. "Anywhere," he said, shrugging as if the destination didn't matter. "Been walking a long time." I hesitated. The truth was, something about him unsettled me. His voice, the way he didn't seem to care about where he was going, or maybe it was just his eyes, so intense, like he was staring into me, not just at me. But the night was cold, and it didn't feel right to leave him standing there. I unlocked the door and waved him in. He climbed in with a slow, deliberate movement. His boots scraped against the seat as he settled, his coat creaking like it hadn't been worn in years. I tried to make small talk, asking where he was coming from, but his responses were vague, disjointed. "Just walking," he muttered, staring out the window, as if watching the passing trees with great interest. I shifted uncomfortably, trying to ignore the tension that had settled between us. I kept my eyes on the road, but my mind kept drifting back to him, to his stillness. Every time I glanced over, he was staring straight ahead, his face unreadable. It wasn't until we hit a stretch of road with no houses, no lights, that I began to feel the real unease creeping in. The car seemed to grow colder, and I could see my breath fogging up the window. The hitchhiker remained silent, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. It was like he wasn't even breathing, his presence so unnervingly still. "How much further?" I asked, trying to break the silence. The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned his head toward me slowly, as though he hadn't heard me at first. His gaze locked onto mine, and for a moment I felt my heart stop. There was something wrong with his eyes, too dark, too empty, like a hollow pit. Then, in a voice softer than before, he finally spoke. "I never asked you to stop for me." The words chilled me to the bone. I glanced at him, my grip tightening on the wheel. His lips curled into a thin, unsettling smile. But it wasn't a smile at all. It was something else, something that made my skin crawl. The air in the car grew thick, oppressive. The road ahead seemed to stretch on endlessly, the trees closing in around us. I suddenly realized I had made a mistake. I had picked up a stranger, but now I couldn't remember why I thought it was a good idea. The hitchhiker's silence, his unsettling presence, made every mile feel like an eternity. I glanced over again, but this time he was no longer looking at the road. He was staring at me, his smile widening ever so slightly. And then, before I could react, the car lurched to a stop. The engine died. No warning, just silence. I turned the key, but the engine wouldn't start. Panic surged through me, my hands shaking as I tried again and again. When I looked up, the hitchhiker was gone. Just gone. No sign of him, no footsteps in the dirt, not a trace. I sat there, frozen, for what felt like an eternity, and in that stillness I heard something faint. Whispers. Soft, unintelligible words coming from the trees. Slowly I looked around, but there was nothing there. Nothing but the dark road stretching endlessly ahead. And then I understood. I had never picked up a hitchhiker.